Howdy my friends, nice to see you again. I want to share some thoughts with you. This time,
road trip thoughts and inflation.
Remember, you can always look up more details on optioncrusader.com and my blog. Alright guys, what's up with inflation and shortages? While I'm driving down the road. First of all, let's talk how inflation is made. Who is responsible for inflation? Why it's the natural phenomenon? Why it is man-made, and why is it made by the government? Not directly from the political government, but from the financial government. It's just another department. It's called the Central Bank, FOMC in the United States, or Central Bank of Canada, whatever you want to call it. They do inflation. How do they do this? How it comes that all of a sudden we have all this inflation around us and nobody seems to know where it comes from?
Good question.
All right.
Monetary policies and how it creates inflation.
How do they inflate the money? You have a certain basket of goods in your society, in your economy, and you have a certain amount of people, they work. So now there's a certain amount of money go around. The faster the money goes around, the less money they need. The slower it goes, the more money you need. So that's called the velocity of money. These money operations on a day-to-day basis, they built this M1 SL money stock. So now when the banks pour more money into that system, first of all, they're printing all that money. That money they create out of thin air. It's not backed by gold as it was in the 70s. It's just printed out of thin air. They induce it into the system by buying mortgage-backed securities, MBS. What is that? So the banks, they sell certain mortgages, they put them in a bundle, in a package, and they sell them to the central bank. The central bank buys them and is creating an artificial demand that makes the banks selling mortgages because they know they can sell it to the feds. The more mortgages they sell, the better for them, as long as the feds are buying it. It's one way to pour money to the banks. They lend it out. They call you every night, day and night. If you need a home equity line of credit, come to us. And then they also try to finance bigger projects because the money is just plenty and cheap. So that increases the money flow, or supposed to. But for sure it increases the money stock. So now when you have the economy not keeping pace with the money that's poured in, because the money that is printed should be equivalent or reflecting the GDP growth. When the GDP grows at a certain amount of percentage, of course, to keep the prices stable, you need to increase the money flow or the quantity of money. So, but that's not what we're seeing. In the US, the feds are buying $12 billion every month just on mortgage-backed assets and inflating the money that way. The second way you can inflate money is buying bonds. So you buy the bonds in pieces, $5,000, $10,000, $1,000 pieces, and you receive a 1.59% yield right now, which means the $10,000 you lend to the government, they pay you 1.59% interest rates annually as a coupon, as they call it, and after 10 years you get your money back and the last payment. That's how it works. But since the government is buying all those bonds from corporations and banks and all this, the yield, since it's coupled to the face value of the bond, goes down. Why is that? Because the artificial demand for buying bonds creates higher prices in the bond market, right? That what is in high demand will become more expensive, right? Especially when you pump in money. So now for your $10,000 bill, if you want to sell it or if you want to buy it, you pay more than $10,000. You buy it for $11,000 or for $10,500. But fact is, you buy it more for what it is printed on the face of the note, where you get your yield from. So when you buy it for more money, the yield is still fixed to the face value, but you paid more for it. So overall, the yields are coming down, right? You pay more for it, but the yield does not increase and is not on the total value what actually you paid for, but based on the face value that's printed on the note. So the whole idea for the government to keep it that way is to keep yields down. The government does not want the yields to increase. That's why they're buying the bonds. There are two effects. Institutional traders and investment banks will put their money also into bonds, because they will give you a secured, pretty risk-free return. And with the bond prices, same thing. The bond price go up, the yields go down. The people keep their money in the stock market because the bonds are not so lucrative. When the recession hits or the Fed stop buying all those bonds and the mortgage-backed assets, it means that the demand is diminishing, reduced, goes down. So it will increase the yield, because all of a sudden you can buy the bonds for under $10,000. You can buy it for $9,000, $9,500, and you still get the yield for $10,000. So you make an extra profit. So that's the bond market. So when the mortgage-backed assets, securities, starts to drop, in the demand starts to drop, the banks will think twice how to sell mortgages now, because all of a sudden they are stuck with the risk. When they are stuck with the risk, they will start increasing the prime rate to make up for the delinquencies that now will be on their books, not on the books of the Feds anymore. So they will increase. When the tapering starts, the mortgage rates will go up because the bank rates will go up. Not only the mortgage rates, but home line of credit and also the line of credits, pretty much, because the prime rate of the bank will increase. So later, when also the interest rates might start going up, then the lending rate of the government of the central bank will actually increase, which is the second part of the so-called prime rate, because the prime rate is always the prime rate that the central bank or the FOMC is lending to the banks, and then the banks have their own prime rate on top of this, but they are lending it out to you, but only to their best clients. And then when you walk in, you have an extra, they say prime plus 2%, but the prime rate is already two different kind of primes from the central bank and the one from the bank itself. So as soon as the interest rates go up, the lending rate from the Feds go up, so the mortgage payments will increase again. The lending rate for the mortgages will increase, line of credits going up, everything goes up in what is related to the money in the bank. So that will cool off the housing market big time.
Big time.
It will cool off the housing market and everything that is connected to it. Home builder, construction, and so on. That's how you cool down the economy, because all of a sudden the home prices will also come down, because you cannot sell what you build because it's harder to get mortgages. Not everybody qualifies anymore, right? So that cools it down, that brings the inflation down in that sector. And that's also one thing, how you will crush the stock market. But if you don't do this, the inflation will continue to creep up. Why? Because you're buying all those bonds and all these mortgage-backed assets with fake money. It's printed, it's out of thin air, it's not real. They just make it real because they give it to the bank. Therefore they take the bonds, therefore they take the mortgages. So what does it all mean? In the end, when the inflation gets out of hand, they have to drastically reduce the money input into the money stock. As I had with the example before, if you have 1,000 goods, you have 1,000 people, they're selling 1,000 goods for $1 a piece, and all of a sudden you pump another $1,000 into that system, all of a sudden you have $2,000 available in your system, but the goods, they do not grow. It's the same goods, so everybody has more money, but the same goods. So, and they're willing, and they do it, they spend more money, but there's no production on the other end. So that's inflation. Inflation is made by monetary policies only. And here you have it. Let's move on. So fiscal policies, they can increase or make the situation worse by giving the people extra stimulus, lots of money where they don't have to work for, and that also stimulates the economy in the first few months, until you find out that the inflation is right behind you. And when the inflation is right behind you, then you know that your money is not worth that much anymore. But it already started a year ago, 6 months ago. But nobody noticed it, because everybody thinks that's free money from the government. No, it's not free money from the government. They give you $100, and then they say the $100 you had is only $50 worth now, because now all of a sudden you have to deal with all the inflation. Money supply should only grow in the same amount the GDP is growing. When the GDP goes up, there should be money printed and induced into the system. That's it. And if the economy is slowing down, you have to take money out of the system. How do you take money out of the system? You own the bonds, you own the mortgage-backed securities, you sell them. And the banks, they pay you money for it. So the money is already in your coffin of the Feds, the central banks. They keep it, they destroy it. So you take money out of the system. So that's what the FOMC and the central banks are supposed to do. And that's how they keep the prices stable. So, but that's not what we're seeing. we're seeing a pumping of money endlessly into the money stock that results in increased prices in assets and stock prices and resulting in inflation.
Fiscal policies and how it creates shortages.
The fiscal policy is making things worse. While the monetary side of this equation is driving inflation up, the central banks or centralized banks, the government is increasing and creating shortages. For example, labor shortages. How do you create labor shortages? Well, you pay people to stay home. There's a competition going on between the government and corporations. Corporations want to pay people and workers to work. And the government wants to pay people and workers to stay home and not to work. So if it doesn't matter how you square it, how you name it, child care credit, here's an extra money for food money, extra rental money because you cannot afford your rent, here's extra driving allowance. All these things are artificial infusions of money. So they bring it over the fiscal side of the government. Where's this money coming from? Same source. It's printed. It's printed and given to the government. They hand it out to the people over stimulus packages. No matter how you want to call it, it doesn't matter. Anything. So also this should only be increased with the GDP growth and not above. You pay people to stay home, they will stay home. The more you give them, the more they will take it because they are smart. They say, why should I work for $40,000 when I have a $30,000 coming in? I have no more expenses. I don't need to drive a car. I don't spend money on gasoline. I don't have to buy extra foods. I don't have to buy extra work clothing. I can save all this money. I just stay home. I can pay my rent. That's it. The government gives me allowance for rent, extra money for rent, extra money for food, extra money for clothing, and they give me a free pass for using public transportation. That's an awesome system. Now, this is how you create labor shortages. Alright, so how do you create other shortages? For example, California. In California, it's very, very hard to build new homes. You cannot tear old homes down and then build a new one, like what we do here. It's an old house from the 70s, we tear it down, we build a duplex. You have an old duplex, you tear it down, you put a fourplex in there. Or you build a multi-apartment building. The whole house is way less worth than the land it's sitting on in the city, so they buy it. It will make it only lucrative for the developer if they can build an apartment building. In California, you cannot do these things. It goes through a process, it takes forever. And then you have all these environmental regulations. You have the regulations for this and that. In the end, nobody builds there. So what's the outcome? There's a high demand on rental properties, but there's no supply. The supply is kept short. So they're creating a shortage on rental properties. Then they go there, then the government goes there and says, you see, we have a shortage on rental properties and the prices are so high, we have to give you money so that you can deal with it. So they created a problem, as they always do, with their monetary and regulatory policies. Then they show up and say, we will be your savior, we give you money so that you can afford it. So now they're paying money, which they print, and give it to the people so that they can afford housing. So subsidized. All the subsidies is all printed money. So what does it all mean? It means the policies of the government, the regulations, they create shortages. The central banks, they create inflation. Both together we call socialism. That's socialism at its finest and how it evolves out of capitalism with liberal progressive politics. greed. One elite feeds on everybody else. You work, they eat. And what does it have to do with the government?
The government loves inflation.
The government has said, well, why should we let the inflation go? The government doesn't care so much. Remember, your GST, the taxes you pay, they're all percentages of what you make. You can have a wage increase of from $40,000 to $50,000. All of a sudden, you're in a different tax bracket. You pay more income taxes. But also your GST is always a percentage of the price. When the prices go up by 10%, the GST will go up by 10% as well. The government doesn't care. They still get the same amount of money. And if they are run short, they just print it. When they print it, the inflation goes up. They have all the money they want, and they don't care if you pay more.
You pay more.
The bank are the culprits. They are in cohort with the government, and the government owns you. Alright, that's all what I want to say for today. Think about it. Inflation is always monetary policies. Even when the government is giving out stimulus checks, they also contribute to inflation, but the money is still printed in the monetary system in the central bank. And regulations will create shortages. When you have shortages, prices also go up.
This is all for today, my friends. The topic will be continued next time.